Today, I have the honor of bringing on somebody I've looked up to for a long time in the industry, the founder of the GSD Mode podcast and the GSD Mode brand, Joshua Smith. He's now partnered with me at the Wolfpack, but we take his entire journey back to 2005, what he saw in the market, his innate ability to not only see what's coming in the market, but how he did that, right? It's not an innate ability, as he says on the show, but it is a 100% all out dedication to watching metrics and taking the opportunity to act accordingly. So from 7,000 homes sold, top 30 real estate agent in the nation, to, one of the most elite modern day coaches in our industry, and now partnering with us at the Wolfpack to completely burn the ships, go 100% all in for the first time, which was a surprise to me that we talk about on this episode, but also the ability to partner with him, co-partner with me. Co-sponsorship is a thing at eXp. So yes, if you are interested in any of that and partnering with the both of us and having both of our areas of expertise pour into you so that you know what move is next in real estate, please book a call below. Please mention Joshua Smith on that call, and we will make sure that we throw you into that partnership. But without further ado, it's my honor to bring on the founder of the GSD Mode, Joshua Smith. What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Wolfpack Way. Today we have GSD Mode himself, Joshua Smith. Josh, you've sold over 7,000 homes, ranked top 30 in the country as a real estate agent. Tell us a little bit about, the early days of real estate or even Joshua Smith.
Yeah, man. First off, it's an honor to be here, man. I'm really excited for this. So yeah, dude, it in some ways it feels like it went by like that, but in some ways it feels like this has been a 100-year-long journey. Yeah. Right. And back, when I got started in 2005 and, just hit the ground running. 40 deals my first year, 103 the second, and I started my team and built up from there. And, but again, it was a different time, man. I was 23 years old, wasn't married, didn't have kids. I could work 7 days a week. I did, I just would grind out 80+ hour work weeks, just grind. And, but when I get asked about like, how did you do that? There were really two components to it. So number one, I was at that point in my life where I was so fed up with and sick and tired of being a loser, college dropout, never made more than $10 an hour before I got into real estate. So I was so sick and tired of being broke, so sick and tired of feeling like loser, being a loser. So I had that deep burning desire to succeed, which I found is just necessary. Like if you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult. Like maybe get lucky for, because of the market or whatever, get lucky for a year or two, but it's going to be, very difficult, not impossible to go out there and succeed long-term. But then from there, the one thing, I don't classify myself as somebody that's, intelligent or super intelligent, but
come on.
the one thing that I did right was understanding that, like, I don't know what I don't know. So I'm like, hey man, I failed at everything in my life to this point. So I'll probably fail at this thing unless I have the right roadmap. So I spent my time, did my due diligence. I found the right mentor, found the biggest badass I possibly could find. I didn't care what splits were. I didn't care about any of that. It was just like, I just knew I needed the right person, the right mentor. So I found the right guy. He was one of the top realtors, top team leaders in the country, but he also happened to own the brokerage. So it was like, I had that combination of the right person that could just give me the roadmap. So I had no guesswork. I knew exactly what to execute on, like every single day, what I needed to do to win, but I had that burning desire, and that's what's necessary to execute consistently on those two things. And, that's just what allowed to hit the ground running.
Yeah, that's incredible. And seeking that out, and real estate's an interesting, career path for that, right? You always say that we're the only industry that hangs out with each other. Well, we're also the only industry where you could pretty much throw a dart at the map anywhere and have a mentor that can actually pour into you and serve and is willing to, right? Yeah. I think that's kind of a unspoken truth about the real estate world. Yeah, there's like the secret sauce, but when there's someone shows up and raises their hand, even if you're at a place where you're not rewarded for doing so, there's plenty of people to go around with that. So that's awesome that you were able to seek out that and find that. So as we progress, obviously you said 2005 into 2008, and we know that's when those numbers, the 40, the 100 exponentially grew along with your team growth. But you've always had a knack for finding market shifts and spotting them before. Can you talk about a little bit about where that came from and kind of how you've continued to do that as we've progressed through different markets?
Yeah, and again, it's not like, an innate knack. It was developed because of great mentors, right? So, my mentor taught me, and this is again a gentleman that, he had been through the, high 80 interest rates, the 87, market crash, the dot-com bubble, 9/11. Like, this is a dude that, had been through it and created massive success through those. And he said to me, he's like, look, if you get really good at acquiring and servicing traditional buyers and sellers, then you get really good at acquiring and servicing investors. Then you get really good at acquiring and servicing distressed property. So foreclosure, short sale, probate, divorce, people in distress situations. It's like your business, because one of those will always be strong, regardless of the economy, regardless of the market. If you want to make your business recession-proof, your business continues to grow and scale for the longevity of your career, right? One of those is going to be strong. But then he followed that up with, but then you have to have the ability to read markets. So I was just taught, early on, like when the great financial crisis hit, because back then, dude, we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have, it was a different climate, right? So, so all of a sudden, all these realtors that I knew were dropping out of the industry left and right, because it was something like 42% of the industry dropped out within like a year period. It was crazy, or a couple year period, but it was, huge chunk dropped out pretty fast. And when I'm having conversations with them, they're like, man, I had to leave the industry, because the market crashed so hard. Nobody saw this coming. I'm like, what do you mean you didn't see this coming? Like, how could you not see this coming? But I didn't realize at that point in time, because I was just so laser focused on myself, my business, and again, we didn't have the same awareness and information the way that we do today. I didn't realize that others weren't doing this, so to me, it was pretty. Now, when I say that, I didn't know the severity of the crash, but it was very obvious. So it was like, by the time the market fell off a cliff, like, dude, I was in with short sales. Had relationships with 35 different banks, outsourcers, asset management, firms. So I was able to position myself, but having that ability to read markets is very important. It's like Wayne Gretzky says, you don't skate to where the puck is, you skate to where it's going. And it's not rocket science. You can pay attention to inventory rates, absorption rates, pay attention to what's going on, but you got to seek those opportunities. I always look at this, the mental philosophy that's served me extremely well throughout my whole entire career is there is no such thing as a good market or a bad market. The market's always good for somebody. As real estate professionals, it's our job at the highest level to identify whom the market is good for, shift, pivot, adapt accordingly with our marketing, prospecting, focus, energy, and efforts, and our business continues to thrive. Like right now, these agents there's not all these, but there's a big percentage of the industry that's complaining, that's struggling. Dude, there's massive opportunity right now. You're struggling because you haven't pivoted. Dude, what worked yesterday isn't going to always work today. What works today isn't going to always work tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point. I always say, find the winners in the market and adapt and build a value stack that will help serve that individual, right? And so very similar models there. And you mentioned a couple metrics, and you did mention social media as well. And I think that now we're armed with information, but it's not the information that is absolutely needed, right? We're armed with what the mortgage rate's going to be. We're armed with what the Fed's going to do. Sometimes understanding the correlation of those two is a little bit difficult because of the social media with people that should know. So you mentioned a couple metrics there, and you've also mentioned on calls and things within the Wolfpack that we're both a part of, kind of what you're foreseeing now. So lean in a little bit to kind of where you think that's going and why those metrics are so important, and what you see as the future, the next 6 months to 18 months looks like.
Yeah, I think the worst thing that we can do with the information overload that exists out there. So it's information overload, but crappy information overload. And I'm not saying I always have the right information, but what I'm saying is go to first sources. Like I'm not going to listen to somebody else's opinion on YouTube that has no damn idea what's going to happen with the marketplace. Like I'm going to go to, first sources. So like an example, one thing I track very heavily is consumer debt to savings rate. So go to the Federal Reserve. Like if anybody is watching or listening to this, you go Google Federal Reserve St. Louis consumer debt to savings chart. So that's a chart I pay very heavy attention to. right? So if you look at right now today, at no point in time in recorded history with the consumer has the debt to savings gap been this wide, is accelerated at this point in place. Okay, well, who are we helping buy and sell homes? The vast majority of us consumers. Maybe some of you are in with institutions, but the vast majority of real estate that's done, and the vast majority of those in this industry are helping regular buyers and sellers. Then okay, one thing I pay attention to is to the Mortgage Bankers of Association. I'm always looking at month over month, what are the application rates? Right. So when I look at like, okay, if I look at, okay, applications going up, are they going down? That gives me an idea of, okay, probably what the next 90 days is going to look like with, buyer activity, what's happening there. And then paying attention to, one of the issues with stuff on YouTube or X or whatever is they're paying attention to national data. Right. Well, what happens in Phoenix, Arizona might be different in Colorado where you're at. Dude, I have long-term coaching clients of mine there in Alabama where during the great financial crisis, they saw a tiny little bit of a dip, but they didn't get ripped apart like my market did. So, real estate's very hyper-local. Like you got to know your market, study history. I know, the last 100 years of real estate cycles in my market, what's taken place, how long those cycles lasted, what the key indicators were that led to those cycles. But even then from there, it's like, look, history doesn't always repeat itself, usually rhymes, but doesn't always repeat itself, so each cycle can look slightly different things can lead to that cycle. So, this is where I will start kind of mind mapping out, okay, what are the different possibilities of how this can go? Because there's always going to be opportunities, like if we look at what's happening right now. Now, I also, and this is just a philosophy I operate by, hope for the best, plan for the worst. So I am planning on this next cycle being worse than the Great Depression and far worse than the Great Financial Crisis. Why am I doing that? Well, number one, the consumer is in a way worse off position. The government is in a way worse off position. If you look at the Great Financial Crisis, that was a United States issue that the rest of the world felt. Now, if we look at this, like this is a global issue. We've never had this type of a debt crisis globally. So there's so many things going on. Corporations, dude, like 99.5% of the equity markets are essentially insolvent. They're zombie companies. The whole entire S&P 500 is held up by 7 companies. So I'm looking at this is just a house of cards, dude, like with the biggest everything bubble we've ever seen at magnitude scales of size than anybody's ever experienced in recorded history. So, okay, I'm expecting it to be the worst crash then in recorded history on all fronts. Now, I could be wrong on that. I do not have a crystal ball and I don't pretend to. I'm not here to tell anybody, here's what exactly going to happen, right? This is just what I do. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. Because here's the thing is if worst case scenario doesn't happen, I'm good to go. If it does happen, hopefully I prep correctly and I'm good to go. Like there's zero harm and foul in it. It's just the best way I've found to hedge our overall business and success. So then from there though, as I mentioned before, it's like, okay, people are like, oh, do you think we're going to see all these REOs? I don't know. If you look at things happen differently. If we look at 2012, HUD got 20% of 20% of HUD got acquired by the big 3, Blackstone, Vanguard, State Street. So then what we started seeing in 2012 is instead of HUD going to the market with these REOs, anything that met their investors, their institutional investors. Now they're not selling directly to Blackstone or, Vanguard, State Street, but they've been owned sub funds and, it's just it's a mess. Right. But if you go do the math on, just like when all those homes were sold by Zillow, go look at who acquired those. It's owned by the same institutional investors that own both companies, right. But anyway, with this, they started packaging up anything that met institutional investors buy box, private equity firm, and sold that directly to them. Well, now since Freddie and Fannie have both had, 20% institutional ownership, which is the max a GSE can sell, acquired by the big 3. So they have a lot of control, with decisions, whatever, that comes to that. But then now it's even different where instead of, selling, the banks fall in these foreclosure process and selling to private equity firms, what they're doing now is like, if you look at Fannie Mae, Freddie, like, dude, they're selling all the non-performing paper directly to private equity and hedge funds. Then the hedge funds and private equity firms are carrying out the foreclosure, keeping the ones that they want, and then doing dispositions on the one that they don't want. So I have no idea if we're going to see the REOs. But what I know right now, if I look at opportunities right now, I know 30-day rates are in the massive rise. So we're hitting those, right? Because the owner is still in control until that property is foreclosed upon. Like they're still in control of that sale of that asset. Okay, probates, divorces, Yeah, right. Number one reason for divorce, financial hardship right now is the most unaffordable time to be alive as a U.S. citizen. So for the vast majority, this is the most difficult financial time of their lifetime. So divorces are on the rise. Again, probates. I think probates will be the biggest listing niche that we will ever see for the rest of our lifetime. So if you look at probate as an example, you got 150 million residential housing units in the United States. 50% of all residential units are held through baby boomers and the silent generation. So those are 62 plus, right? 70%, according to Schwab's research and study, 70% of families that inherit estates via probate end up selling those estates. They either don't want to or can't afford to keep these properties and hold on to them. So we're talking 75 million units total. So with that 70%, you're talking 52 million units roughly that will be hitting the marketplace over the next several decades. Because if you do the math, 40% of that generation, unfortunately, will not be here within the next 10 years. So like when agents come to me right now, like, hey, look, if I could have one listing niche that would yield me the most juice for the squeeze to the biggest opportunity going forward, I'm like, dude, probate, bro. Right. Yep. So, but this is like, we just got to pay attention, right. So if you just pay attention, it's like, okay, for the first 18 years of my career, I never went after divorces. It was never a niche that I had. But then 2 years ago, looking at market adjustments, whatever, I was like, hey, just seeing what's going on financially, whatever. I'm like, dude, I think that this would be a good niche to go after. So we started doing research on it, then started implementing it. And now it's our second best listing niche.
Yeah. And I think that's the piece is you've mentioned several, right? It's not like you have to just go from the bird's eye view and be like, oh, we have to go to REO, right? When you see this stuff coming. And when it doesn't happen, like you're still developing a value stack for listings that can be easily altered to one another, right? So say you go hardcore into, probate and divorce. I don't think those things are going away. But as you mentioned, kind of the changing hands and the power plays with the institutional investors. Say REOs don't hit in Denver, for example. If you've gone that way and you've developed those relationships, well, every institution is part of some sort of transaction with real estate as you go. So you can kind of shift as you go. So talk a little bit about the strategies and how you start to break them down. For instance, just as an example, in 2008, 2009, when you got ahead of the massive foreclosure, what was your first, 2 or 3 steps into building those relationships that turned out to be the right, pivot for you at the time? But talk a little bit about developing those relationships and the strategy behind what you're doing there.
Yeah. So, short sales, pre-foreclosures, 30-day plus late, right? So we can call it 30-day plus late pre-foreclosure, I guess. That honestly happened on accident. So my first year, I did nothing but open houses. Then from there, I got sick and tired of begging all these other agents for open houses for my storefront. So then I was like, well, I'm allocating 10 hours a week begging these agents so I could have 4 or 5 open houses a week. Like, why don't I just allocate that time to going after expireds? So then that way I have my own store, whatever. So then though, got to a point in late 2006, early 2007, where the reason why all these people were expiring is because they're underwater. So then I was like, okay, well, what do we do here? Go to my mentor. I'm like, what's their situation? Like, these people, they can't afford the house. Yeah. Right. And he's like, well, there's a thing called a short sale. Now I didn't need him to teach me it. Like he would just just point, dude, I got Google. I can figure this stuff out. Like I just need to be able to point me in the direction. I'll go figure the rest out. So then I went out there and learned about short sales, everything I possibly could about short sales. And because I saw the opportunity was there. Now I'm not going to learn anything about anything if there's the opportunities out there. It's just wasted time, So I'm starting to do short sales and we're seeing a big uptick in that. And one of the things real quick too, is how I'm always reading markets is, dude, I'm having conversations. Like, dude, every month I meet with my title reps. I'm looking at, hey, like, what are you seeing an increase of? What are you seeing a decrease of? So like if we look at, 2005, 2006, massive traditional business. 2007, started seeing traditional business slow, but we started slowly seeing the uptick of short sales and REO, right? And at that time, the reason why I say short sales versus pre-foreclosure is at that time, everything was pretty much a short sale, right? Now the difference is a ton of 30-day lates, but you got about, 55, 60% of them that have equity. We don't have to do a short sale. And we still have to do some of those, but you have way more equity sales today that are behind on mortgages than we did back then.
Quick sale.
Okay. Yeah. So it's like, okay, you got traditional business coming down. So as I'm seeing this, it's like, okay, like anytime I'm putting energy and effort into something, and then all of a sudden, and I was cranking it with results, and all of a sudden those results start to diminish. I start breaking out, okay, is there anything that I did differently in my strategy? Like what's lead to the diminishing? Is it me or is it the market shift? So at this time, I'm meeting with my, because my title companies, if I have, 3-4 different preferred title companies, they might see 2,000 transactions a month. Yeah. Right. And they get to see who the buyers are, who the sellers are, where they're coming from, where they're going, all of those things. So I'm meeting with them, right. Starting to see an uptick. So we're seeing an uptick in REO and short sales. Now if I just see an uptick 1 month, that doesn't put anything on my radar. But if we got 3-4 consecutive months and it's continued to grow and this is continuing to come down, okay, now I'm starting to pay attention over here. So I'm still doing, and the hard part about a pivot and a shift is, man, you got to add hours, time, energy, and focus, right? Because I got to do all the things I'm doing for my traditional business. And on top of that, it's like I'm already working 12-hour days. So now I got to work 16-hour days because I got to put 4 hours a day into getting into and learning this stuff. Well, this stuff, kept just growing. This kept coming down. So it got to the point where, okay, REO short sales was about 90% of my business. Traditional became about 10% of my business. Well, then all of a sudden, 2012, traditional staying flat, REO and short sales start coming down. So I'm like, okay, well, this ain't, traditional isn't ticking up yet. These are coming down, right? Homes are still selling. So for the first time ever, we started seeing private equity firms come in and start buying properties in our marketplace, right? So again, meeting with title vendors, meeting with whatever, just looking at what that is. Okay, well, you had like Invitation Homes, buying 500 homes a month in just my market. So I'm like, okay, how do I get in with them? What does that take? What does that look like? Right? And each institution is different. Like REOs, you go get you apply, get applications. I don't know if right now I'd even recommend going through that. Now, all my agent partners, and like for myself, our applications are in. Now just remember that 85% of all the paper that's done today and that has been done for a lot of years is through the GSEs. So Freddie, Fannie, though, like those are the big ones that you want to get in with. So we're getting our applications in, but we're focused on what we can control. Marketing to pre-foreclosures, short sales, again, the other niches. But I don't know if I put an insane amount of energy into getting into REO, because the opportunity was there. It wasn't that I was like early to it. Like it was growing, right, in our market. And but by the time the market melted, because 2000s, late 2006, early 2007, that was growing, dude. You could see more and more foreclosures every single month, right? So then I go out there and spend thousands of dollars buying asset manager lists, reaching out, just prospecting, just bam, bam, bam. How can I help you? How can I help you? How can I help you? Do you need anything? Do you need, right? I wasn't begging for their business. It was, what do you need? How can I help you? If you have an agent partner. So every Friday is an example. I'd email every asset manager that I had their contact with every Friday. Hey, happy Friday. Hope you had a great week. Just so you know, I'm available. I'm working all weekend. Here's my cell number. If for some reason you can't get a hold of one of your agents, you need anything done, emergency board up, you need a BPO done, whatever it is, just call me. I will get it done. Right. Yeah. Before every holiday, last business day for every holiday. Hey, just wishing you and your family Merry Christmas. Just so you know, I'm available. I'm working. There's an emergency. You need something Christmas morning. I will leave my kids opening their Christmas presents to go do what you need from me.
Not anymore. We'll get to that later, but
but that was, but people are like, oh, Josh, that's so extreme. Yeah. But we're heading to extreme times, dude, right? Like anybody that didn't really pivot with this, they just got freaking tore apart and ripped apart. And I'm not about just how do I sustain? Like, dude, I want to thrive, right? I'm not one of these human beings that could just, how do I just get through this till things get better? No, I want to freaking kick ass and thrive, right? So might be different, might be wired different than other people. But then, 6-7 months of that it took before I had somebody, give me an opportunity that they needed something. I did that, delivered on it, then they need another opportunity, delivered that. Well, then next thing you know, I'm, law of reciprocity, I'm getting my first assignment. It's kind of like how you built your business, but through helping, human being, like I'm helping these institutions. Like if I
Just
want to go
helping.
again with a probate attorney, I'm like, hey man, like I know you need secondary, neutral third party valuations. If you need help with estate companies, you need help with any vendors, whatever, like I'm here for you. Like, how can I help you? Yeah. Right. So, and then with the hedge funds, man. So, and I'll share this story of just like, you guys, like, you gotta, don't just take a no. You got to think deeper. Again, you got to think of like, what are the opportunities? How can we position this together? So there's a huge hedge fund that I wanted to get into with really bad out here. I mean, they, cause I had all the listings, right? I had all the REO short sales plus some traditional listings, but so I had this hedge fund that kept, buying, putting offers in, and they, agents kept reaching out to me. They were developed a relationship with their underwriters, but they kept coming to me like, hey, we want your listings. I'm like, well, what are you guys' goals? So they told me their goals. Well, they're about 50, 60% of their goal. I'm like, dude, I got a small army of agents on my team. I know this game. I will make sure you hit your goal. Like, what do I got to do to get in to represent you guys? And I kept getting told, you can't. I'm like, what the hell? Like, why can't I? So I finally developed a relationship with one of the underwriters deep enough where he was just upfront and honest with me. He was like, hey, look, dude, we're founded, our founder is a Mormon, and they don't do anything, you can't, unless you're part of the church, like you can't get in. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm not going to like go change my faith just to get business.
You thought about it, didn't you?
I'm about business, but like, and then like, I'm not that anything's right. I got tons of friends that are Mormon, but I'm like, okay, like what do, but then I was like, okay, well, dude, but then I didn't take that. I was just like, dude, there's gotta be a way. So then he says to me, he's like, well, any listings that you bring to us that are not on the MLS, you can represent us. But the second they hit the MLS, our in-house agent team has to represent them. So then I'm like, okay, yeah, right. So we start leveraging that, feeding them these deals, trying to find them off-market deals, whatever. But then I'm like, man, there's a bigger opportunity here. Now at this time, we were buying properties for 85, 100 grand, right? That now today are worth 600, 700 grand. So the real estate was already, 30 cents on the dollar. So they're paying full price for all of these homes. Full more, at that time, right? So I created a system called 50% more commissions. So I would reach out to all the listing agents and say, hey, any of your listings that you have before they hit the market, let me bring you a cash offer. Shoot me the photos, shoot me the property specs, shoot them to me. I will get you a cash offer that will be as high, if not higher, than you can get on the open market. And if we put this together, like, let's just say they're charging, I don't know, we can't really talk about commissions, but they're, whatever it is that they're charging, I'm like, whatever you're going to pay for the co-broke agent, only give me half of that, right? You could take the other half. Now, some agents like, what are you talking about? Commission activities. I'm like, dude, all I did, they'd email me the specs. I would remove their information. I'd email it to the underwriter. The underwriter would mail me an offer back. I'd remove the underwriter's information. I'd email it to them. I mean, I'd be at like dinner and I'd put like 6 deals together just at the dinner table, right? Like it was just easy street, right?
It was a different time. Institutions are different, dealing with mom and pop.
So then it got to the point where we're popping 50, 60 those a month, right? So then it got to the point where it's too much that I could handle. So then I started teaching other teams that I knew how to do this, and I would just take a 10% residual override. So this is what I mean. That specific scenario and situation probably won't work for anybody that's listening to this call. But the reason why I share it is, you got to think deeper with this stuff. Yeah. Right. I mean, there's so many opportunities, but you got to think outside the box. You got to look at the opportunity. Then you got to be a little creative with this. And if you do that, man, there's just insane opportunity.
Yeah. And I think, a lot of people in our current marketers, like, okay, yeah, like they said no or whatever, but the leading with value, right? Hey, what's it going to take? And then they open the door a little bit and you kicked it in, right? You're like, here you go. If that's what you want, I'm working longer, harder, more, and you do it. And, you often say everything works, nothing doesn't. And that's that's a true testament of that piece. So, as we've gone through this and Joshua's really dove deep into some other, things that maybe you're like, oh man, like how do I get some more of that? Or, I need assistance. Currently at eXp, our brokerage, co-sponsorship is an opportunity. You have the opportunity to be coached by both of us, sponsored by both of us. So if you are interested in that, definitely hit the links below. Joshua's links will be down there too. And if you click my link, definitely mention this. But let's kind of talk about the agent who's paralyzed in this market right now and trying to do a bunch of different things. As we've always said, kind of list to last, list or die, whatever that is. And you've just unfolded, I don't know, probably 4 of the 10 ways to really, target and prospect for listings. And you mentioned the probate as one that's coming. The reason you mentioned that is because of, the growing gray tsunami and the largest wealth transfer that we'll ever see probably in our lifetimes. So for those agents that are like, where do I start? How do you coach agents that come to you and pick one of these niches, or, put them on the right path? Because you're a great, pointer. Here's the system, go. So when agents come to you, is there any, questions, or how do you determine like, okay, this is probably the best route for you?
Yeah. So the first thing I identify, is it really a strategy issue, or is it like a mindset? Because the vast majority, if they're like, oh, I'm paralyzed, I don't know what to do, right? It's, so first thing is you got to get your mental game right. And what I mean by this, I'm not talking like, oh, you got to go. I've never been to a Tony Robbins anything. What I'm talking about when I say your mental game right is you got to deal in realities. So middle class is getting wiped out. Probably is greater than not that it'll be evaporated and just gone for the rest of our lives. There's no need for it, no reason for it. It's born during the Industrial Revolution. At that point in time, there was a time for it. Now we're going through deindustrialization, tech, AI. So we got the haves and the have-nots. So you got to deal in realities of which side of that equation I want to be in. You're either going to have those that have money and then broke, right? So rich and the poor. Okay. I know I've been both. I know what side of the equation I want to be on. They're both hard, but in my experience, being broke is harder. So number one, like, you got to deal in realities. You got to get extreme clarity on what you want, why you want it, why it's important to you. And this is where I start with a strategy plan, right? Because if I look at this, it's like, okay, if we look at a strategy plan, the way I break this down, if we reverse this, is like, okay, we identify the mountain. The mountain is the end game, right? Like, what is the mountain that you want to climb to go out there and, because I don't know about you, but dude, like, I don't live to work. I work so I can go out there and create the life that I want to create for me and my family.
Right.
So it's like, okay, what's the mountain? That's the end game goal. Get the more clarity. Clarity is power, man. So I'm gonna have extreme clarity in the mountain I'm climbing. Then the strategy plan is, okay, like, what is the most effective, efficient trail map to get me from the bottom to the top? So I'm going to identify that. Well, then maybe you're climbing that mountain and then all of a sudden, boom, a tree is falling over and then you got to course correct. That might be a market shift, right? Like, well, it's having to course correct, but the strategy plan is the trail map. Then the daily execution, weekly execute, that's just the steps that we're taking every single day. So you don't want to, the only way to find the right strategy plan is to have clarity on what you want, why it's important for you. Right. So then we can actually truly reverse engineer the architectural game plan to get you from where you want to where it is that you want to go. So we always start with that, but again, so many people use, I don't know what to do as a cop out. Right. If you don't have that burning desire to succeed, you got to do whatever you got to do to tap into it, because you will not create success unless you do that. Like, you got to get yourself there. The pain of not accomplishing a thing must outweigh the pain that you're going to have to go through. There is no escaping the pain. We're all going to go, you're going to go through massive pain. Growth is all about suffering. There's no growth without suffering. So you're going to have to go through the hard work. You're going to have to go through the pain. Yeah. Look at all of this as a pressure test. So if we're all just little pieces of coal, right? Well, pressure gets applied to coal. The vast majority of pieces of coal crumbles. Then there's a select few that handle that pressure well to become diamonds. You got to commit right now. Am I a freaking diamond, or am I going to crumble like all the other pieces of coal? So if you, right. So if you don't get that right, none of this other stuff matters. Then from there, when I help somebody come up with a strategy plan, again, it's like, because the thing I don't want to do is get them on a strategy plan and then all of a sudden they built themselves a metaphorical prison versus that metaphorical empire. So here's an example. A husband and wife team that I've been mentoring for, since day one they got in the industry. Amazing business now today. They take 22 vacations a year. They're able to build their whole entire real estate business and run it all from a laptop anywhere in the world. They're in Germany right now as of today, right? We were on this call, but they'll, between the two of them, pop 70 deals a year. Then they've got, some agents on their team. They'll do another, 100 or two. But so when we were building this, they came to me and said, hey, we want to be able to run a real estate business where we can travel the world. Our hotel rooms is our office for the day. Our kids are going to do homeschool, so we can work and play and see the world with our young family as we're building this thing. Okay, well, maybe they're the best in the world at door knocking. Well, okay, if they're door knocking, now they're a prisoner to their local location. That's going to block them. So we have to look at lead gen strategies and how you're going to approach those strategies, also based on what can get you there. So you want to think about solving the immediate problems, but you also want to make sure that you have clarity, long term. So then from there, I just assess, okay, it's as simple as, okay, what are your target? What are your goals? Do you want to focus on buyers? Do you want to focus on sellers? Let's identify and look at what's going in your market. Most things work good in all markets, but there are certain things that don't work as good in some markets as others. So we want to take that into account. The other thing that I look at is, okay, what are your strengths? What are your skill sets? What do you enjoy doing? What do you not enjoy doing? So like Jeremy, I'm guessing if I told you, all right, dude, hey, I want you cold calling these leads 3 hours every single day, 5 days a week, you'd probably be like, no. It works. It's amazing. Right. But it's against, like it's not your personality type or the thing that and the more that we enjoy something, the more that we'll stay consistent with it. We'll learn to master it. I'm not saying that all things we're going to enjoy, but if we can align those things, if we can get the stars to align there. But then from that, the key thing, and you kind of said this earlier, is look, less is more. So when you have lesser activities, you can do more of them. You can do them more consistently. You can dial in the processes, the systems, and you can truly master it. Like the path of closing 100 deals a year as an individual agent or even a small team is doing one or two things. Let's just say we got our past client sphere of influence. That's the one commonality that we all should have together. But as far as new client acquisition, it's one or two things, 3 max. An issue I see so many have right now is they're like, oh, dude, the market's changed. I got to do more. Their mind goes to more of, oh, now I got to go out there and do 8 different things. They're doing all of them half-ass. They're getting no results. Like, dude, output equals input. If you're putting half-ass focus, energy, effort, right? Like, dude, like I want you doing one thing, mash it. And then when it comes to doing those things, like I'll get somebody that's like, hey man, I need money within the next 4 or 5. Like I really need to turn my business around fast. But then maybe they're like, well, I also want to master YouTube and social organic. I'm like, okay, now you can do everything right, not make one mistake, but with, YouTube, social media, organic, like we're talking about 12 months before you start seeing any consistent element of income. So let's put that on the back burner just for the next 6 weeks. All I want you doing is mashing. We'll pick, one strategy for the now money. When I say now money, like what activities can you do right now that's going to lead to a paycheck, within the next 2, 3, 4 months max. Right. And I look at this, like if you got one bow and arrow and you got 2 targets, you can only hit one target. You got to pick and choose which target makes sense to hit. Then once we hit that target, like I can get anybody to master, whether it's open houses, whether it's, going after any of these different niches that we've talked about so far, anything else, I give them to master it and start getting the right run rate that they need, the process, the systems, get their skill set down in 6 weeks. Now that we have that down, we're not going to stop that. But now that we have that down, let's grab that arrow. Now let's point at the social media, YouTube. So then now we're putting, understanding that's going to be a long-term play that maybe will surpass the immediate, but we got to focus on the right things at the right times.
Yeah. And I think that's, shiny object syndrome's real. Social media doesn't help. Our attention spans don't help. But when you really step back and dialing this in, you have to understand that, yes, some of the things take longer to build. Some of them take longer to gain momentum. But having real estate, focused conversations through cold calling, door knocking, open houses, those kind of situations is where it's at. So I think that's the biggest piece. And, then when we step back and we're like, okay, here it is. And this is something at the brokerage level, I'm sure from your past and everything that you talk about. But when an agent comes to you and says, we have to put money on the table, so I'm going to, have a bartending job or a serving job, what's your, kind of advice on how to actually transition into a full-time real estate job? Because time is there, right? Typically. But why do we see so few people actually leave a part-time job to be a full-time real estate agent?
Yeah. So, okay, I just created, it's funny because I just released just today, right before we jumped on this podcast, on my YouTube channel, it's how to successfully go from part-time to full-time. Because I've helped, I don't know, hundreds, if not 1,000 people do this at this point, right? So there's a few things, right? So number one, so if I chunk this down on the podcast, if you guys want to go watch it, it's like, I don't know, a full 20 minutes of me breaking this down. But for time on this podcast, because I know we got other things to cover here too, I'll just go through the core things, right? So number one, we got to identify what's your true replacement income. So whatever the number is, like whatever your walk away number is. So maybe you're making $7,000, 10 grand. Let's use 10 grand, right? Cause it's easy number. So you got 10 grand a month coming in from the, your main hustle, whatever the income is.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Let's identify your replacement number, your walk away number. But then dealing in realities of what that walkaway number is, like, think about benefits, thinking about, those things that maybe we don't have in real estate. So now that I know their walkaway number, then from there, I break down and deal with, okay, well, like what are your hours that you're there? What are other commitments that you have in life? Because one thing that I want to do is I want to build out a truly realistic schedule. So we know the hours they have, and we know the hour time blocks that we're plugging in those hours. That's doable. Because it's like people have lives outside of real. So if I create unrealistic plan, that's unrealistic for them to be able to follow, like they're not going to stick with it. So I want to deal in realities. Okay, let's develop the schedule. Now we got the time blocks. Then from there, based on your situation, again, based on your skill sets, based on the hours that you have, based on what your, unique situation is, let's come up with your lead gen strategy, identify your one thing, maybe two, but 1 to 2 things. And then let's now put those strategies. And then, so when they have, let's just say they got 3 hours a day, 4 days a week, and then they have, 10 hours on the weekends collectively. Well, I want to make sure that every one of those time block sections is accounted for. They know exactly what to do, because time is that much more precious in this situation. Like we can't waste it. And so when like this is how I help part-time agents make 6 figures, even being part-time. Right. Where they can successfully transition out. Then we want to make sure. So now we got the strategy plan, with precision. There's no guesswork of what's got to be done every day, every week. And if they want it, they will do it. If they don't want it, they're full of shit. They just say they want it. Right. Then they won't do it. Right. Like either do what you say you want or you don't. Right. But then you got to look in the mirror. And if me saying that to anybody that's watching or listening, this offends you, look, I can't offend you. Nobody can offend you. If something offends us, struck a chord, like you got to go look in the mirror and do some deeper reflection research on that. Like it's either we're taking the actions that we need to take to create what we want to create, or we don't. But if we don't truly want the thing. Right. If you truly want it, you'll do what you got to do. Then from there, we want to make sure everything's tracked and measured. So it creates predictability. So now we know exactly what we did, how much of it that we did, to replicate it, to duplicate it. And then I want to see 4 consecutive months. 3 worst case, but 4, because it's very easy in this industry to get lucky for a month or 2. It's very difficult to get lucky for 3 months. It's impossible to get lucky 4 months in a row. So we have 4 months of hitting the replacement income. It's all tracked and measured. It's dialed in the schedule. That's the most risk averse way that I found to make this transition, right? Because the mistake that some make is they make it prematurely. So they will make the transition, but it's because they do it premature, it's temporary. And then they got to go back with their tail between their legs, begging for that job back, because now they've run out of money 3-4 months later.
There's never a bounce back from that in real estate. Like if you put that much time in and you're going for it, I mean, it's similar to spending your commission checks before they're earned. So let's transition a little bit here, obviously, into the coaching space. You've done a phenomenal job even on, this podcast so far, kind of coaching and dropping amazing nuggets. But recently, obviously 8.5 months ago, you made a switch to eXp and the Wolfpack and kind of burned the ships, right? You had your amazing coaching business. You had, a lot of different things. You've now, brought all that under one umbrella. Talk about that decision and kind of the preparation that came into that, because that's a huge shift.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. Yeah, and it's something I never thought I'd ever do. When people, I had, a lot of people reach out to me like, man, I'm shocked. I'm like, nobody's more shocked than me, because maybe I have no way of to quantify this, but I'm pretty sure I talk more crap about eXp than any other human being alive, and honestly, if I break down why, dude, it was my own ego, my own emotions. I never really took time to look at the model for what it is. And anytime we don't truly understand something, that's where, prejudices and false judgments or whatever may come. Like that's what was me, dude. I didn't get it. I didn't understand it. I just prejudged it, thought it was a joke, whatever. And I just laughed at it. Right. But the teacher appears when the student's ready. Yeah. Right. So 20 years in this industry, looking at just reflecting very deeply of what I've created. Now, my plan was to go out there and create my own nationwide thing. and we were on that path. But then to be able to get to the goal that I have of building an organization with 40,000 agents, I started, there's two questions that I had to really ask myself was, okay, number one, do I have the ability to do this? And I don't know. That was my honest answer is, I've built some decent businesses, I've, done some good things and create some success, but I've never built anything to that scale and size. So I haven't been tested in that way. So the reality is I don't know. But then the second question I asked myself that challenged me even more so is, am I willing to put in the sacrifice and do what it takes?
Yeah.
Because when we're talking, like, it's a whole different story of building a 40,000 agent organization EXP. But when you go build out your own, dude, you got to raise capital. You got to have hundreds and hundreds of staff. You got to, 7 figures a month in operations expenses. You got to hire your own leadership team. You got to deal with lawsuits. You got to, and honestly, I was like, I do after 20 years of being in this industry. And this is just me being very upfront and honest. I'm like, look, as I reflect back, I've got 3 kids, 17-year-old, 15-year-old, and 12-year-old. And I'm like, as I reflect back, I'm like, did I really do everything I ever want to do with my kids? Now, I made it to all the major important things and spend time with them, but did I really show up in the way I wanted to show up? Did I take all the, travel experiences? And I know there's still time left, but, I'm like, to answer that question, no. So I'm like, I did a decent, I can lie to other people. I can lie to myself and, but at the end of the day, like just me being like, just being fully trained, like we got to be radically honest with at least our own selves. And I'm like, no, I kind of fucked up there. So then I'm like, all right, dude, I'm not willing to fuck it up for the next 20 years. Yeah. Right. So like, as our kids get older, as we have grandkids, I'm like, I have an opportunity to change this. But if I go down this path, the sacrifice I'm going to have to put into this is going to have me devote at least the next 15 to 20 years to build this in that manner. So then I was like, nope, I don't know for sure if I'm capable. But number two, I know for a fact I'm not willing to put in the sacrifices and, all the lawsuit area, coming in. So then I was like, okay, well, what would still allow me to accomplish my vision of having a big, massive impact on 40,000, lives through the vehicle that I understand and know, right? Which is real estate. I don't know anything else, right? So I'm like, hey, I want to have as big of an impact as I possibly can. So I set a target of 40,000, think it's something that's doable and achievable. Like, what is a model I can plug into where I can still accomplish the same mission, but not have any, of the liability, not having the headaches, that already have the infrastructure. So it just got me searching. So people always ask me, like, how'd you get recruited in the eXp? I'm like, nobody recruited me. It doesn't mean over the years I didn't have people trying, but I'm like, all this was my own self-discovery that came me and led me to doing my own due diligence to realize that eXp was the model for me. And then once I saw it, dude, man, I saw it. It was like, boom, I burned we said burn the bridges. Dude, I shut everything down, made the leap, started over with zero. I was okay with doing that, but I knew, because I knew the opportunities. I mean, this is the best opportunity I've ever seen in my life. And it's proven to be true. The results that I'm getting now, the momentum I'm getting now, the impact that we're already making. I mean, it is unreal.
Yeah. And obviously we've talked so many times, you've said it so many times, it starts with looking in the mirror, right? Everything's possible when you really have that, that why, and the relationships with your kids. Like, you did a lot of really good things financially, but that's only half the battle. Right. And so that's super important. So as a longtime skeptic, just to shout you out a little bit, from eXp in just 8.5 months built, you become the #1 personal attractor in that time period at the company. So, how did you plan for this? Because there was a strategy involved. There was, so what have you done to become, the top personal attractor in that 8.5 months at a company that has established, several great leaders and several, great attractors?
Yeah. So, it's, and look, for somebody that maybe is jumping in the same model, maybe because like, look, dude, like, yes, right now I'm the #1 personal attractor year to date in the company. I'm the fastest grower in the entire company. If you look at, month over month percentage of growth, like, at least that I have awareness of, based on all the data and the numbers, but it's like, I'm not breaking records. I mean, there are people, like, I set a target and a goal my first year, and then I was going to recruit 1,000 agents. I'm falling short of that. I'm going to die trying to hit it or do everything I can to hit it. But, but it's not like I'm doing something people haven't done. People have done it. There's other people that at different times have done what I've done. There's people that have surpassed me. So it's not like I'm doing anything special, like that hasn't been done before, but like I'll tell others that when they jump in, I'm like, look, you got to also, context is important. It's like when I busted out my first year in real estate, I'm like, yeah, well, the thing that people don't understand too is my dad owned and operated gyms when I was a kid. I started selling memberships for my dad at 14. So I had 9 years of sales experience and good training before I got into real estate. So it's like I was able to apply all of that versus somebody, maybe it's a teacher jumping, it's never sold anything in their life. So we can't always compare, our chapter 1 to, somebody else's chapter 20, whatever. Right. So with that being said, I've had 19 years of building teams, building brokerages, selling, whether it be coaching software, like I've been, recruiting agents for 19 years. I've recruited thousands and thousands and thousands of agents. Probably if I look at all the different ventures I've been involved in, probably 15,000 plus agents that I've recruited, throughout my career. So like I've developed that skill set. I know how to do it. So yeah, when I jumped in then, and just understanding and knowing that, okay, my mission is to get to 40,000 agents in a 10-year period of time. That's twice as big as anything anybody's built within eXp within 10 years. So I'm like, okay, I got to give this all of me. And I had a mentor that said something very cliche that we've all heard a million times before, but he said, it's impossible to fail anything if you truly give it your all. And again, something cliche we've all heard before, but for whatever reason it hit me. And this is, right before I joined eXp, so I pull out a blank sheet of paper, dude, just blank sheet of paper, put it on my desk. After he said that, just hit me at the right time. Pull out a blank sheet of paper. I'm like, I'm going to write down areas of my life that I've truly given it my all. I looked at the damn piece of paper, dude, for like 20 minutes. I couldn't think of one area in any of my life ever where I've truly given it my all. Now I've given a lot. I've lost over 100 pounds, overcome obesity. I've overcome, I'm sober now for 5 years, overcome alcoholism. I've done, I've given a lot, but like, just again, being honest with myself, have I given it my all? I'm like, no. But then I had to ask myself, like, why not? Like, I know, especially when it comes to business, I know I'm not full of crap. I know I'm not saying that I want these things. I don't want them, but then I'm like, why? I'm like, dude, that, pretty much, since I, at least for the last 15 years, like as I actually started getting good at business or decent at business, I was like, dude, I've always had like 5 or 6 different businesses going simultaneously. Yeah. So this one gets 20% of me, this one gets 30%, this, right. So, so I got, 6 okay or good businesses, but 0 exceptional. So I wanted to create a goal that would challenge me where I could answer yes to that question. So that's where I, reverse engineered the 40,000, came up with this and, but then I'm like, okay, to do this, I got to give it for the first time ever in my life, 100% full focus, 100% full energy. And that's where I just boom, laser focused in. So with that too, cause I'll get some other, builders that'll be like, oh man, how are you doing this? And they'll, beat themselves up. I'm like, yeah, look, if you had 60, 70 hours a week and all you did was agent attraction, could you build much faster? Well, yeah. I'm like, okay, you're having to balance production with attraction. So yeah, you're going to grow slower, but then from there, very simple, dude. So my first 4 months, I was like, okay, if I can't identify easy to scale, replicatable, duplicatable strategies that new agents, partners that want to build with me can plug into and start recruiting. If it's not replicatable, it's not duplicatable. Or if it's not replicatable, duplicatable, it's not scalable. So I'm like, hey, to get to 40,000, I can't do that alone. I need 40 killers that have the ability and capability and desire to have 1,000 person, organizations. How do you get to 1,000? You get 10 that are capable, of adding 100. So, I just came up with very easy cross-sell, networking, DMing, texting, cold calling strategy that anybody can do. So for my first 4 months, I didn't leverage podcasts, any cold audience or any warm audience, all just cold audiences. And then once I recruited in my first 100, and I felt like I got that down, then I was like, okay, now let me start leveraging the podcast. But now, to answer your question, it's, and from day one, dude, 10 text messages every single day. 7 days a week, 10 text messages, right? So cold text messages every single day. They're very easy. Anybody can do them. Right. I'm got my social media posting strategy, DMing strategy. And then with my podcast, and just being consistent every single day at those things is what's just keeps
Right.
building momentum.
Yeah, it's a business, and there's multiple ways to do it, and just the organization and the tactical piece of it is, incredible. But it's really eye opening when it's like, okay, well, I have this business, I'm building this business, and as somebody who's in production, who's also focused on attraction, that's very real, right? It's
Yeah.
it's sometimes 3366 or sliding scale depending on what's going on, but the 100% buy-in is certainly a difference. And then, you're on that path, right? Repeatable, duplicatable systems that you can hand down to people that are easy, that aren't necessarily, personality and, based or anything. It's just like, you can do this, develop that cold list strategy.
Yeah, and
So
then and
that's,
to circle back real quick to what I'm repeating myself, and I can't say this enough. I have the burning desire.
mhm,
Like everybody eXp keeps telling me, "Oh, Josh, you're doing so amazing." I'm like, dude, every day I wake up, I'm pissed off because I thought I'd be double where I'm at today. Like this,
mhm,
it's, to me is not acceptable. Right. But again, with that underlying reason is, look, I refuse to get to a stage because, fast forward probably in the next, 7 to 10 years, if our kids get married and start having kids at the age that my wife and I did, say, okay, like we're going to be grandparents. And I'm
mhm,
like, I refuse. I am on a timeline here. Yeah. Right.
mhm.
Of like, I want to have true financial freedom and time freedom, by this certain point. So like it's like, yeah, I could, start coasting most coast, but to me, dude, I don't. Right.
Yeah,
It's, I know time is finite. I have my reason. Here's what I want. Here's why I want it. Here's why it's important to me. Yeah. I'm not messing around. Yeah. Right. So,
yeah,
and not saying that to make me, right. I just want to stress the importance that anybody watching and listening, like, you got to figure out for you what that burning desire to succeed is. Napoleon Hill talks about it over and over and over and Think and Grow Rich,
yeah.
but if you don't have that, dude, like you're going to get complacent, right. It's, you got to tap into it.
Yep. And so looking ahead, the next 2 to 3 years, what trends do you see shaping real estate, and what opportunities do you see for your organization and your growth?
Yeah, I mean, there's three things that we have to have awareness of when it comes to pivoting, adapting, changing. Change that we'll see. And when I say change, just think of opportunity. Yeah, right.
Mhm.
Because there's the biggest opportunity amongst the biggest chaos. So number one is going to be what's happening with the economy and the market. Things are going to get way uglier before they get better. Now I don't know the severity of it. Planning on it being extremely severe. Like to the point where banks are collapsing, colleges are collapsing, institutions are collapsing. And then who knows with the era that we're into, Civil War, World War III, like who knows how this could shake out.
Yeah.
But it's gonna, but we got economic impacts, right? And again, there's gonna be massive opportunities in there to go out there and grow and explode. If your business isn't succeeding, it's not because of the economy, it's not because of the market, it's because you're choosing not to take the right actions. So we got those opportunities there, but to seek the opportunity, you got to pivot with it. Secondary thing is technology and AI. Look, AI is nothing new. Been around since the 50s, but technology, if we look at AI, just think technology, right? So technology is growing at an exponential rate. So we've got to adapt with it. Yeah, right.
Mhm.
I'm a big believer in that. I don't believe that, technology, AI is going to replace a real estate agent, but those of us that leverage it correctly in our business are going to dominate those that are not using it.
Mhm.
So that's opportunity number two, whether you want to call it pivot or opportunity, same difference, right? The third thing is rules of engagement. So we all saw the NAR settlement statements last year. That is a 5-year protection. DOJ has been extremely vocal that they do not like this. So we got 4 years left, right? So that's probably going to get disrupted, uplifted, turned out, right? It's probably going to, more from there. A lot of people don't have awareness of this, but now those were the seller side class action lawsuits. Now the buy sides have started.
Yep.
And you already have, at least the smart ones already settling. Yeah, right. To get ahead of this, right? Because they know if they settle early, they'll get out with having to pay the least. And eXp's one that just settled it too. Yeah, right. And some of the ones that are ahead of this are doing that. But then so we got buy side going on right now. Word on the street, at least from my legal counsel, is that RESPA's next. Going after JVs, agents not do, right? Like how many agents do you really know? They're like, oh, hey, here's my 3 recommended vendors on every possible thing. It's like, no, here's my guy, right? Like, so it's like, okay, Now, I'm not saying this to, going to create fear for anybody, but rules of engagement are going to be consistently changing. So we got to pay attention to those, adapt accordingly. Now, all three of those things create massive opportunity. I don't know exactly what all the opportunities are going to be yet. I'm looking at, like, right now, look at what are the opportunities right now. And then what are the, maybe opportunities within the next 12 months that I can foreseeably see, but those are the big three things that I'm paying attention to most right now and looking for the opportunities within.
Yeah. And I think, it's a perfect, translation to partnership, right? If you have guys like Joshua and myself who are in the markets, understanding those things and helping those things, by nature, we're sharing that information with our organizations, with, our people, so that they can get ahead. Because the traditional real estate agent working 40 to 50 hours a week may not have the time to kind of foresee those things and be able to decide to pivot, and then have a strategy and the time to do that while they're still servicing their clients, right? And creating that income, kind of going back to that, part-time agent piece as well. So super incredible opportunity to partner with both Joshua and myself. Josh, where can people find you? Again, the GSD Mode podcast is nothing different than this. Absolute gold every single second. But where can people connect with you if they're looking to find you?
So like, if you like Facebook, Instagram, it's all Joshua Smith GSD, stands for Get Shit Done. So Joshua Smith GSD is my handle on all social media. And then in YouTube, if you just type in, Joshua Smith GSD Mode, you'll find my YouTube channel. I don't really have a website. I don't have anything to sell you guys. It's just, a lot of free information. I've got, I think like 3,000 videos on my YouTube channel now. I started creating like 12, 13 years ago. So a lot of great information out there, but that's where you guys can connect with me.
Awesome. Thanks so much for your time, brother. And we'll see you within the Wolfpack for sure.
It's an honor. Peace.
All right.